Laura and I met in women's media because we both worked in women's magazines, and that's where I started my career, and I have continued it in a lot of different ways. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So I'm really looking forward to sharing Laura with you because she's got some amazing stories to tell.
Thank you for being the kind of friend that, like, you pick up the phone after years and we can just pick right back up where we left off. I looked in my phone and the last text conversation was maybe from 2013. But it was just like a day had passed. It was just like, blah, 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 blah.
And I think we've chatted a little on social media.
Yes.
So we both came into our early careers in women's magazines and discovered the power of storytelling to other women.
Yep.
And we've both pivoted a lot. We're still storytellers. So your stories and the stories that you have been engaged to tell over the past few years have been pretty interesting. So I want to start by asking you what you've been up to. A couple of things you've done recently.
So my most recent job was as the spokesperson for women's and consumer media for Harris for President. I started at Biden for President in January, working as a consultant from my lovely, comfortable apartment in New York City. And then somewhere around June, I got convinced or came up with the idea and convinced other people, I'm still not sure which, to take a full-time job at the campaign and move down to Wilmington to be a full-time spokesperson for the campaign and has anybody ever spent time in Wilmington, Delaware? Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a different way of life than New York City. I lived there from June until November, the week after the election.
And what was your job title there?
So it was spokesperson for women's and consumer media. I have not done comms as a day job in many years. I have been lucky enough to oversee departments with great comms people, but had not been the one on the phone, flacking, as we call it, pitching. Maybe this century, for a long time. Media has changed a little bit, and it was part of what was scary about doing this was taking a job that I knew I would have a little bit of a learning curve on, and I knew was really usually a younger person's job. So I took a very mid-level job on the campaign. All jobs are important, but this was mid-level.
And how did you adjust to that? What kind of adjustment was that? Because I know I could do it. I just don't know how.
Yes, it was thrilling and freeing in some ways. Not having, honestly, I love managing. That's always been one of my favorite parts of many jobs. But it was kind of nice to not have to worry about anybody else but myself and the work I was doing. It was like, oh, that seems like a problem over there. I wonder what the bosses are going to do about that. I'll just go back to my work now. And a couple times I would start to be like, oh, I should try that. And I was like, not your job. Sit back down. What was hardest about it for me is that leaders of teams know everything going on and disseminate the information. I like the role of being a spokesperson. I like things like this because I love disseminating information. I love getting information and sharing it. I love telling stories. And being the one who had to wait to receive information from my amazing higher-ups on the campaign was still something I had to learn to kind of chill and get comfortable with. Just learn the whole process of doing comms for a presidential campaign, which was intense. Especially July was intense for a lot of us with the transition from President Biden to Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket. And being in the middle of that as it was happening, having a front row seat to it was fascinating.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because it was a huge moment. Mm-hmm. It was a huge moment for women. It was a huge moment for the country. What did it feel like in the room?
You may remember President Biden announced that he was going to step off the ticket and endorse Vice President Harris on a Sunday. So the next Monday, we all show up at work in Wilmington, and we're like, what's happening? what's going to happen? And I started just making some very basic reach-out calls to all of my women's media contacts. And let me just tell you, what a wonderful time. As I said to my boss that day, the head of comms, Michael Tyler, he was like, how you doing? Are you okay? And I was like, it's a wonderful day to be talking to women's media, because the conversations of calling the editors at, at Glamour, someone at the Times, someone at Pop Sugar, someone at Bustle, someone at Betches, and saying, hey, let's talk about this. The excitement of, oh my God, the stories we are going to get to tell, the opportunity to uplift the first Black and Indian woman running for president, or just, again, another woman running for president, was so exciting. To just, the voices of everybody that I called, all of the female journalists, all of them, obviously nonpartisan, but you could just hear some joy in people's voices of the excitement of the moment.
I guess, what was the biggest piece of excitement for you? Obviously, professionally, that was amazing. And it's personally very gratifying, but what was sort of the most personally exciting piece of that for you?
I mean, I guess it was, I came up like Barry Nan as a magazine editor. Then at some point I pivoted to when magazines started to dry up a little bit as an industry, or just contract, let's say. I started doing content roles at companies like WeWork, that's another story, and other kind of big tech companies. Then I worked with the Center for Reproductive Rights, and basically getting to use all of my years as an editor and writer to talk to editors and writers about the stories that we wanted to tell coming out of the campaign was just so gratifying. To be able to, I made the decision to move down to Delaware and do this because I said the best way I can help the campaign, which I think is important, is women's media and telling women's stories, because that's what I know how to do best. And that's why I'm going to take this role that might not seem directly in line with kind of other trajectories. And I'm so glad I did, even though it didn't work.
But I'm curious to know how you feel the storytelling that we've always done has been influenced partly by external things, but partly by your internal growth, your internal, ideas that shift as you get older and get more experience. What are kind of the things that you've noticed that are more fun, more in-depth, more interesting?
Well, I think there's certainly different mediums and different ways to tell stories now. Obviously, we weren't focused on what our TikTok looked like 10 years ago, or even maybe 5 years ago. So obviously the platforms are evolving. The speed with which a news cycle moves is evolving. But at the end of the day, it's people's personal stories that move you. I don't know whose quote this is, but I always think about the concept that 10,000 people dying is a terrible statistic. The story about one person's death is a tragedy. And so the more we can highlight specific stories of women like Amanda Zarowski or Caitlin Joshua, who had terrible, terrible health ramifications because of the loss of Roe v. Wade and their inability to get abortions when they needed them for their health or other reproductive health care. Their stories mattered because you see the person and you kind of can connect to what they're feeling and you hear them talking. And that remains, I think that's how women communicate with each other. We tell each other our stories. With what happened, tell me about your day. I don't know about you, but like male partners aren't always quite as storytelling oriented. It's like, fine. But women like to tell each other stories, and I do think, we started this when I was at the Center for Reproductive Rights. Not that we were the first ones to do this, but we were leaning into it hard with our case, Zarowski versus Texas. And then that continued with the campaign. And, I think even more of that will be a good idea. Even more opportunities to tell individual people's stories that can help you connect to an issue, that can help you, put yourself in that person's place and say, oh, I want to be part of what they're working for.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the things that is an upside of social media, is that we get access to so many more people's stories, and it gives us a different worldview, if that's what we're looking for.
Yes.
You have to be you get what you look for.
Yep. Yes. Yes.
I tell people who tell me they do their own research, they will absolutely find what they're looking for.
Confirmation bias is real. Yes.
Because the algorithm is the algorithm, so the more it knows what you like, the more it gives you what you like.
Or just hear someone sit next to you, say a word, and then suddenly you're getting served ads for that thing.
All of these moments in your career, to me, my observation has been, the through line has been friendships.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how that has influenced not just the way you've received guidance or received opportunity, but how you've shared them.
So working in women's magazines, one of the topics we covered a lot sort of in the last years I was doing it, let's say 2010 to 2016, was the idea of mentorship and finding a mentor and how important that was for women to find mentors and sponsors. I have always found the most uplift and help and just support from my peer group, from my friends. Once in a while, there have been people older and more experienced in their career who have been incredible kind of beacons of talent and inspiration to me. But, I think your friends can be, if you lean into it, your best kind of friendtors, mentors. It's your kitchen cabinet. It's knowing which friend to say, Dana, do I need more necklaces with this? Or another friend, will you eyeball this document for me? Like realizing the power of those relationships and friendships and investing in them is something I would imagine every person in this room does without even thinking about it, one way or another, all the time. When I look back, most of the kind of moments when I was realizing I needed to leave magazines at the time, it was starting to feel like the trash compactor scene from Star Wars every day, where it was just getting smaller and smaller, what was the real estate available for legacy media. A good friend introduced me to another friend who introduced me to another friend, and I ended up going to WeWork, which at the time seemed like an amazing jump to this very hot mission-driven company in my own city. And then again with the campaign, it was in 2020 that I called a dear friend of mine that was working on the campaign, and I said, I can't think about anything else. Put me in. There's got to be a job I can do. And it just so happened that the first call, she was like, great to hear from you. Let me think. And then I didn't hear from her. And I said to a friend, I didn't hear from Adrienne. I don't think she wants me. And she was like, maybe she's busy. Call her back. And
we all need that friend.
I did that. And she was like, oh, girl, I just had something come open yesterday that I think is exactly right for you. Are you serious? You're ready to work full-time on the campaign? And it was 2020, so I got to do it from my apartment. And I was like, I'm in. And it was knowing her and staying in touch with this friend that I had made when we covered the Hillary campaign when I was at Cosmo in 2016, that when I first met Adrienne, just staying in touch, investing in the friendship, got me to have the opportunity in 2020, and then really led me back to it in 24, led me all the way to Wilmington.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
This
for
is great.
creating this incredible forum.
Well, and thank you.